last Thursday, we talked of sattvic joy, and we ended there on Shlok 37. That was a very, very important shloka, and we get an idea, like a milestone, that if I can reach this level of my state of mind, then I know that I'm very close to the end or to the goal that I am seeking. That was sattvic joy. Now, 38 and 39, Bhagwan Krishna will tell us about rajasic joy and tamasic joy. So let's read Shlok 38. Vishayendriya sanyogat yattadagre mritopamam pariname vishamiva tatsukham rajasam smritam. The delight which ensues from the contact of the senses with their objects is eventually poison-like, though appearing at first as nectar. Hence, it has been spoken of as rajasic. So, three kinds of joy: sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. Last time, sattvic joy, just to recap, we have 5 factors which contribute or which make sattvic joy. Just to recap, first one was abhyas. To experience sattvic joy, you have to have constant practice. Okay, it has to become a habit. Second, dukhantam. It is the end of all dukh. When you start experiencing sattvic joy, you will no longer experience dukh. Yatta dagre visha miva. It feels like poison in the beginning, troublesome, terrible. But pariname amritopamam. In the end, it experiences as nectar. In the beginning, it feels like poison because so much of practice you have to do. But in the end, the result is you will experience nectar. And lastly, Atma Buddhi Prasadajam. So this sattvic joy is like a prasad, and it is being given to you because of the purity of your intellect. It arises from the purity of the intellect. Now, this shloka is about rajasic joy. Sattvic joy arises from the purity of the intellect. Where does rajasic joy arise from? Bhagwan says, Vishayendriya sanyogat. It arises from the contact of senses with their corresponding sense object. Vishaya, object. Indriya, senses. Sanyogat, union, contact. Rajasic happiness, therefore, is conditional. It has to have a stimulus. Until there's a stimulus, rajasic joy cannot happen. And that stimulus could be anything. It could be another person, it could be food, it could be a movie, it could be money, it could be jewels, places, experiences, situations. There has to be an stimulus. So rajasic happiness is a reaction to a stimulus. Now we have got 5 sense organs. Everybody knows that: eyes, nose, ears, tongue, and skin. And each sense organ has got a corresponding sense object. So eyes can only perceive form, roop. Nose can only perceive smell, okay, gandh. Then ears can only perceive sound, shabd. Tongue can only perceive taste, ras. And skin can only perceive touch, sparsh. Eyes cannot perceive sound. That is only the job of the ears. Ears cannot perceive taste. That is only the tongue of the function of the tongue. So each sense organ has one sense object And these 5 sense objects make up the entire material world. Everything in the material world will fall into the category of one of these 5 sense objects. Okay. Now, when the sense organ contacts the corresponding sense object, 2 results can happen: happiness or unhappiness. Rajasic happiness happens only when there is a contact. Just by knowing about it or by somebody talking about it, it will not happen. It will happen only when there's a contact, or one more possibility is there, when you imagine it. When you imagine it also, you will also experience some rajasic happiness from that. So the first thing is, there has to be a contact, either physical contact or contact by imagination. So what happens then? How does this rajasic happiness just suddenly happen with this contact? What is the mechanism? So before the contact, there are vrittis, thought modifications, which arise out of desire for the object. So you have perceived the object, a desire has arisen for it, and that creates agitation, movement, longing, desire. So when you actually obtain that object, either by the taste or by the sight or by the sound or by the touch, these desire vrittis relax for a while because you've got it. No need for the longing anymore. So you've got it. So for a moment, those vrittis subside, rest, relax. And what you experience, that happiness, is actually the happiness that you're experiencing of your own self. But you don't realize that that is the happiness that you're experiencing because you think the happiness is coming out of the object that you have obtained. This is the mistake we make. And by thinking we are getting the happiness from the object, your happiness becomes a rajasic happiness. Because there is no happiness per se in any object. There is no happiness in a glass of Coca-Cola or in a diamond ring. There is no happiness over there. The happiness is what you're experiencing because of your false adhyas, your false superimposition of happiness on the object. So the first thing in rajasic happiness is contact has to be there. Second, this rajasic happiness is extremely short-lived. It cannot be a permanent happiness. It is a very temporary happiness. How come? Because the object itself is not permanent. How can there be permanent happiness in an object which is temporary? The object will change. When the object changes, your happiness will also disappear. So earlier I used to give this example that imagine you're sitting in your favorite restaurant and eating your favorite dish and you're feeling so happy with it. And then suddenly you discover that there is a dead cockroach in your plate. Where will your happiness go? It will just disappear because the object has changed. So your happiness has also disappeared. So not only the object can change, but even your mind can change. Mind is also not permanent. Mind also keeps changing. So how can I explain that? Let's say you have a new job and you get a very handsome paycheck, like deal, whatever it's called, contract, you're told that you'll get this XYZ amount of money and you're really happy with it. You're happy, it's rajasic because it is conditional to the salary you're going to get. Now suddenly you go to work and your other colleague who also joined along with you for the same level of job, and you start talking with that person and you find that person has got a higher paycheck than you. He has got a higher deal than you have got. Happiness gone. Happiness gone. So your state of mind has changed, and no longer will you feel that I should be happy with this situation. Okay. And thirdly, why is it so temporary, this happiness? Because the more you enjoy that object, the prolonged indulgence in that object automatically reduces the pleasure that you will get from that object. Okay, so the first slice of cake that you eat, lot of happiness. Second, third, fourth, not so much. So if there was happiness in the cake itself, then the first slice of cake and the 10th slice of cake should give you the same happiness. But no, the happiness gets reduced. Therefore, this happiness cannot be in the cake, and this happiness cannot be permanent. It's a very short-lived happiness. So the first thing about Rajasic happiness is that there has to be a contact between sense organ and sense object. Second thing about Rajasic happiness is it's very short-lived. The third thing, yatta dagre amritopamam. What does Bhagwan say? It says, in the beginning, this Rajasic happiness will give you so much pleasure, you'll feel like you're having amrit, nectar. See that first slice of cake. Ah, so wonderful, lovely. But pariname visham eva. In the end, soon that nectar becomes like poison, visha. Okay. Why poison? What is this poison? Why should it become like poison? So there is one process that happens in the mind called neutralization. Neutralization. What is this neutralization? So you are indulging in an object, you're enjoying an object. Now, a time comes when there is no more pleasure coming out of that object. No more pleasure while indulging. But if you stop, there will be displeasure. How weird. No more pleasure being derived from indulging in that object, but you don't want to stop, because if you'll stop, you'll have displeasure. How does that happen? Normally, what happens is when people get addicted, let's say, to a substance, there's attachment, there's a rag for that particular substance. It's giving them a lot of sensual pleasure. He cannot stop indulging in that substance. He'll go on having it, go on having it. There is no end. It's not like I've had enough. No, I will have more, till a time comes when that substance is no longer giving him any more pleasure, but he will continue to have it. If you'll ever have a occasion to see an alcoholic, then the alcoholic keeps drinking. In the beginning, he feels a good high, but after a few drinks, the high changes into gloomy morosity. He becomes morose. He stops getting any pleasure from that drink. In fact, if he keeps drinking, he reaches a state of real physical discomfort. There's pain, there's misery, and that pain and misery is equal to consuming poison. Neutralization. He cannot stop. Even though he is having pain in that object, he will go on having it because there is an addiction. Bhagwan Adi Shankaracharya explains this very nicely in Viveka Chudamani. I'll just read the quote out to you. He says, the pleasure born from such contact, which contact? Organ and object, drains out one's strength, drains out one's vitality, intelligence, meditative mood, money, and enthusiasm. And he says it breeds adharma, and it leads to lower birth and even to hell. Vedanta has this very poignant example to explain this nectar changing into poison and not even knowing that you are in the grips of a attachment and an addiction which is taking you to your downfall. They say that this kind of contact and addiction and neutralization is like a man who is so addicted is like a stupid frog. Okay, now this frog has been caught in the mouth of a snake. Very soon it is going to be finished. Okay, but he's unaware of the impending death which awaits him. He sees an insect flying nearby and he sticks out his tongue to catch the insect. The man who is in the grips of rajasic desires is like that. His impending doom is there, yet even at that moment, he will still want his object of pleasure. Okay? So, rajasic sukh, three things we have to remember. It is arising out of contact with the sense objects. 2, it is very short-lived. And 3, it is experienced first as nectar, and then eventually it becomes as good as poison, leading to his death. That is rajasic sukh. Let's go on now. Let us see what is tamasic sukh. See, sattvic sukh was so beautiful. Rajasic sukh is feeling like I really don't need to be there. I need to be careful not to be in the grips of rajasic sukh. But tamasic sukh obviously is going to be worse. Let's read it. Yadagre chanubande cha sukham mohanamatmanaha nidralasya pramadotham tattama samudharitam. That which stupefies the self during its enjoyment as well as in the end, derived from sleep, indolence, and obstinate error. 3 things. Such delight has been called tamasic. Let's put all the 3 sukhs together. Sattvic happiness arising from the self. Rajasic happiness arising from contact of sense organs with sense objects. Tamasic sukh, where does it arise from? It arises from dullness. It arises from ignorance. It arises from intoxications, heedlessness, negligence, all the things which do not fit in with a spiritual growth. Actually, what they say is tamasic happiness is really not a happiness at all, but it is just an absence of pain. Absence of sorrow is called tamasic happiness. Bhagwan gives 3 sources of this tamasic happiness. Let's take them all by one by one. The first source Bhagwan calls nidra. This word nidra is being used with 3 different meanings over here. The first meaning is obvious, sleep. Okay, nidra means sleep, we know that. So if you indulge in too much of sleep, you feel good, but that good feel is a tamasic happiness because you have overslept. It will make your intellect feel dull. Okay, too little sleep is also not good. Too much sleep is also not good. It is not conducive for spiritual growth. And if you'll remember, when we did Adhyay 6, Bhagwan talked exactly about this. He said that yoga is not for those who overeat, and it's not for those who continuously do fasting. It is not for those who sleep too much and those who do not sleep enough. It is not good for those who work too much and those who just have recreation too much. So everything needs to be in moderation for spiritual growth. So too much or too little of anything creates an imbalance. Okay? Imbalance means disturbance, not conducive for meditation, which leads to self-realization. So the first meaning of nidra was sleep. Now, the second interpretation of this word nidra is ignorance. Okay. What are we talking about? Causes of tamasic sukh. So the first thing is too much of sleep. Second is ignorance. Because of our innate ignorance, we are unaware that our true nature is actually Atma. We are unaware of the possibility that in human form, we can discover true happiness, which is not Sukh, but which is Anand. And because we are unaware of this, we are ignorant of this great possibility, what we do is we look for silly little sources of happiness. We keep searching for happiness in the outside world, in substances, in experiences, in people, in objects. So here we are getting some meager happinesses, some temporary happinesses. That happiness which we are getting because of our ignorance is considered to be tamasic in nature. So nidra meaning sleep, nidra meaning ignorance. And the third interpretation of nidra is intoxication, just as I spoke about in rajasic happiness. Here, this intoxication is for forgetting our miseries. Because we don't know our true nature, we think we are limited. And because of our wrong delusion of being limited beings, we feel we cannot experience this, we cannot have that, we cannot have that, and we get misery. We feel miserable about it. And this, we feel that if we take some substance, we'll forget our miseries, we'll be rid of our miseries. But only while you're having the substance, the misery is not going away. The misery is there, only you have become unaware of them temporarily. And that being unaware gives you some kind of a happiness, which is basically only a forgetfulness of your pain. That kind of happiness is called tamasic sukh. So any happiness that is experienced because of excess sleep, ignorance, or intoxication, that kind of happiness is considered tamasic. This is the first source. The second source Bhagavan quotes in this shloka is alasya, laziness, indolence. Now, laziness again can be of three types: physical laziness, intellectual laziness, and spiritual laziness. Physical laziness, everybody understands. This, this feeling of just being inactive, not doing anything, just relaxing. So inactive is very different from being still and silent for meditation. That is sattvic. This inactivity, this being inactive, is basically lethargy. So when there is a lethargy at the level of the body, then you are getting some sukh from this. That's why you're doing that. But that sukh which you're getting is tamasic. Intellectual laziness is also there. So that is, you get apathetic to even, think correctly. Let's say there is a problem to be solved, some issue. If you have to think hard, how will I solve this problem? And that feels like too much of hard work. And so you just have a tendency to just take the shortcut, just find an easy route out of this problem, so I shall be happy. So that happy which you feel by not thinking things through clearly is a tamasic happiness. Okay, you're finding happiness without thinking, by being lazy in thinking. Okay, And then there's a spiritual laziness also. Spiritual laziness means what? Procrastinating about doing your sadhana, procrastinating about going to satsang, procrastinating about doing anything that takes you spiritually on a higher ground. So, alasya, physically, intellectually, or spiritually, all these, that happiness which you get from this source, that happiness, Bhagavan says, is a tamasic happiness. Third source, pramad, a very terrible one. Pramad means, Bhagavan has translated over here, it's translated as obstinate error. Obstinate error, obstinacy in making a wrong judgment, or neglecting, heedlessness in the teachings of the Shastras. In Mahabharata, there is one phrase, I'll read it out to you. It says, Pramado ve mrityumaham bravimi. It means heedlessness is itself death, mrityu. Being heedless is as good as writing your own death certificate, your death sentence. Meaning, heedlessness. Heedlessness to what? To the Shastras. Ignoring the teachings of the Shastras. Then, because we ignore that, we tend to forget or ignore our eternal self, our true nature, our pure nature, our absolute self. And we just operate out of a limited self, operate out of a tainted, unpurified self. And when we do that, when we continue to operate out of our limited self, in spite of knowing that our true nature is a higher self, and not doing any purusharth to move towards that, heedlessness, not paying heed to the Shastras, that is like a death sentence for that person. And you're doing this for what reason? Because you're getting some temporary pleasure, some temporary happiness out of not obeying the teachings of the Shastras. Then that happiness which you're getting is a tamasic happiness. Okay? When you follow the Shastras, obviously you'll rise in your spiritual growth. And when you heedlessly continue to live without following the Shastras, you will have a spiritual degradation. Okay? See, if you remember, often we refer to intellect as higher intellect and lower intellect. So are there two intellects? No. There is only one intellect. Higher and lower are the way you use that intellect. Higher intellect means you are paying heed to the Shastras and you are choosing the right options for yourself, for your spiritual growth. And lower intellect means you are heedless. You are not paying heed to the Shastras. So your actions are lower. Lower in the sense that they are fine. That's what you want, but it will not take you to your highest spiritual goal. According to the Shastras, this pramad or heedlessness is the biggest enemy because it is making you ignore the teachings of the Shastras. So they say that it is the biggest enemy on the spiritual path. Why? Because you are neglecting the teachings, all the 6 enemies, Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, Mad, Matsarya, are bound to creep in to your actions, to your thinking, to your behavior, to your acharan. And through any one of these, Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, Mad, Matsarya, you can enter the portals of hell. That is how the Shastras have explained it to us. Therefore, not paying heed, being heedless, pramad, is a biggest danger for your spiritual growth, and it is the biggest source of tamasic sukh. Now, why is it that it is such a terrible thing? Because of this word. Look at the word. Mohan Atmanaha. Mohanam Atmanaha. Mohanam Atmanaha. What happens with Pramad? What happens with any of the tamasic sukhs, but mainly with Pramad, is it creates delusion. What delusion? It creates the delusion of I am happy. I am happy. Tamasic sukh. I'm experiencing tamasic sukh. I am happy. But you don't see it as a tamasic sukh. You just see it as I'm happy. I'm content. I'm fine to remain where I am. I'm fine. I'm happy to be dull. I'm happy to be lethargic. I'm happy doing what I'm doing. I'm experiencing happiness. Therefore, I don't need to do any more purusharth. That is the danger. Moha is creating a delusion. Mohanam Atmanaha. Whether it is this tamasic sukh is coming out of nidra, or it's coming out of alasya, or it's coming out of pramad, whichever one, it is keeping the person in inertia. It is not allowing that person to move forward because of the false belief, moha, false belief, I am to feeling sukh. But he doesn't realize that this sukh is tamasic and it's going to take him nowhere towards his eternal happiness. Okay? They say nidra, alasya, and pramad. See, what they do is they go on adding extra threads to this veil of ignorance, which is preventing you from seeing your true self. We say, na, there's a veil of ignorance because of which I cannot see my true self. Now, these three factors, nidra, alasya, and pramad, are adding more and more threads to this veil of ignorance. And soon, nothing will be able to penetrate through. Even satsangs, even updesh, pravachans, nothing will be able to penetrate through this because I'm already happy. I don't need to do anything more. Okay? So, in order to reach our ultimate goal, the penultimate state of a paroksh anubhuti is what? Sattvic joy, sattvic happiness, sattvic state of mind. And that means the mind has to be serene. The mind has to be stable. The mind has to be still. And how do we get this? Through Shama. Remember Shat Sampati, Shama, Dama. So with Shama, I need to make my mind still. But Rajasic and Tamasic states of mind create Vishama, disturbance, unbalanced state, unsettled state. So we need, whether it is desire, which is Rajasic, or it is inertia, which is tamasic, both make the person experience hurdles in their final spiritual goal. Okay? Highest sukh comes from relaxation of the mind, from serenity of the mind, which is established in the self. So this takes care of the three joys. If you want, and if you have the time, I will compare the three states of happiness for you. And if you have a piece of paper, you can make 3 columns right now, because it is very important for you to evaluate which kind of happiness am I feeling and where is it taking me. So if you have a piece of paper and if you're so inclined, make 3 columns: tamas, rajas, sattva. Tamasic sukh, rajasic sukh, sattvic sukh. So we compare all the points together so you have a ready-made, ready reckoner for your happiness. First, tamasic sukh is basically an absence of sorrow, absence of pain. That's all. There is no real happiness in it. Rajasic sukh short-lived. Sattvic Sukh, eternal. Are you getting it? First column, second column, third column. Then, second point, Tamasic Sukh is arising from ignorance. It is arising from heedlessness. It is arising from laziness. Tamasic Sukh, what we just did. Rajasic Sukh arising from contact of sense organ with sense object. Sattvic Sukh arising from the self. Got that? Third point. Tamasic Sukh is dependent on being ignorant. Rajasic Sukh is conditional for a stimulus to be there. Sattvic Sukh, unconditional, not dependent on anything. It arises spontaneously from the self. Fourth point. Tamasic Sukh is experienced either in sleep or when you're intoxicated. Rajasic Sukh is experienced while you are in contact with the sense object. Sattvic Sukh experienced as a permanent state of mind. Tamasic Sukh, poison in the beginning, poison in the end. It is poison only. Rajasic Sukh, nectar in the beginning, poison in the end. And Sattvic Sukh feels like poison in the beginning, but results in nectar in the end. Okay. Then, what is the effect of Tamasic Sukh? Tamasic Sukh just numbs your sorrow. Numbs, it's an anesthesia. It numbs your sorrow. Rajasic Sukh just postpones your sorrow. Sattvic Sukh destroys your sorrow. Dukhanta, remember? Just destroys your sorrow. Tamasic Sukh degrades us. Rajasic Sukh makes us restless. Sattvic Sukh makes us calm and serene. And finally, while meditating, Tamasic Sukh just makes us fall asleep. While meditating, Rajasic Sukh makes our mind wander here and there. And while meditating, Sattvic Sukh allows us to be established in the self. That's your whole PhD, I think, on Tamasic, Rajasic, and Sattvic happiness. Take this home with you. Raise your joy from Tamasic joy to Rajasic joy to Sattvic joy. Raise your joy. This was a very old sadhana which we had given you. Raise your joy. How? Evaluate. I've given you all the points. If at anywhere you find there is a Tamasic Sukh coming from any point or Rajasic Sukh coming, make it into Sattvic. You have all the tools with you. Okay? Take that with you. Next time we start a new topic on 18th chapter, Shlok 40. I think we will go on to 40. Yeah. All right. Oh. 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 Asato ma satgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityurma amritam gamaya. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. Shidarpana. Jai Gurudev.